Hi, ladies and gentlemen, Eddie Marcus here again. In observing the conversations that have been flowing around my head, I've taken a few notes here and there because they brought some attention to me, and I want to share, those little moments with you. Well, one of the first things I want to say is to start off by reflecting on this effort to end the right of women to choose, whether they want to have an abortion or not. And so it's basically in reference to like saving abortion rights. Now, I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, that abortion is a major issue, but it is one issue. And alone, it probably is a losing issue. But, if it stood together with the voters' rights bill, if it stood together with those lies that have been given about what would be done for George Floyd and made those things become truth, if it stood along with the Build Back Better policies, then it would be given much more power and a greater chance for change. You see, none of these efforts are any more important than the other. And yet, any one of them stands alone because the rest of them are not concerned enough about that or themselves, because the power to move mountains lies within them working together. And this is a lesson that seems to be very, very difficult to learn, especially when you're receiving and fed difficult information. But the truth must be amongst those things that are being said. For those who got the pure in heart, they will observe what's being done, said, and make a determination about where they stand. For instance, when we talk about what nations or what people are better, what group of people represent something that's better, whether it's individually, whether it's a nation of people towards another nation. And the truth of the matter is basically they all are the same. Yes, there are differences that make them stand out in one way or another, but its effect and outcome of whatever it is doing upon its people is the same. So it doesn't make it any better than the other. For example, I believe just the other day or some day ago, the ex-president George W. Bush was making a statement in Dallas where he was going to say something about one man having the power and to make a decision. I think he was going to try to compare democracy with dictatorship, having that decision, and then go into Iraq. Now, this is not a quote, but it's reference to what was said. Go into Iraq. But what he meant it to say, and I'm sure you've heard about it, was Russia. It was about Putin going into Ukraine. So you got a chance to see that these two are so similar that the spokesman talked about what he did as he was getting ready to say what someone else is doing, because they're the same thing. So did you catch that? If what Putin was doing when he went into Ukraine for the purposes that he went into Ukraine for is wrong, then according to the ex-president George W. Bush, what the U.S. did in going into Iraq was just as wrong. And it's for the same reasons, probably. And the people of Ukraine and the people of Iraq suffered by powers that were much bigger and badder and tougher and more destructive than their own. That's what happens when you have that kind of power in the hands of an individual over another, in the hand of a group of people over another, or the hands of a nation over another. That's exactly what you're going to have. And so somebody got to stand between this gap and tell you there's another way, and it is the way of God. Also, President Biden was making this presentation about Finland, and he wanted everybody to know that these guys and Sweden wanted to be considered members of NATO. And he was boasting how great this is, how successful this is, that all nations like this should be one for all and all for one. Now, wouldn't that be great? All of the nations for one. And I'm talking about the ones that's excluded. I'm talking about included. All of them for one thing, one purpose, one goal, one life, and one life for all of the nations of people. Isn't that fantastic? One for all and all for one. In America, one for all and all for one. Not all blacks for all blacks alone, but individuals, American citizens, all for one and one for all. There would be no January 6th. There would be no white people walking around talking about getting guns. This is ours. We gonna kill them. Nobody gonna take it. There wouldn't be anybody walking around talking about murdering people because of their color. There would be no one talking about don't tell race theory, whatever you want to call it. That wouldn't be taking place. One for all and one for all again. Not just for the nations of the world, but for the individuals in each nation. And all for one. What does that mean? That means peace and prosperity and freedom and joy and the fulfillment of dreams for everybody on earth, human beings. That's what it means. It means that each individual would be playing a part, participating in all of the beautiful, wonderful things that exist in humanity. And it was all designed to do that, ladies and gentlemen. We are not supposed to be experiencing the hell that is going on. The life of humankind on earth is supposed to be divine. It is supposed to be heavenly just by following some simple rules, and that's by following God's rule and not my rule or your rule or his rule or her rule. Because they're biased. They don't care about me or you. God's rule care about us. You, us. We. God's rule does. And that's the rule of peace. That is the rule, my friend, that gives you life. And so when I stand here in the gap, that's what I talk about. You're talking about what I'm saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, is not to be hollow language. I'm speaking about taking the opportunity to exercise yourself in these proceedings that's coming up recently. What is that? I'm talking about these elections. I'm talking about the midterms. I'm talking about people who right now have no idea about the wonderful life that they can be having. I'm talking to them. You going into office, ladies and gentlemen, with all those biases. You running for office with all those biases that you have. Conservative this, liberal that. All of that I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen. It needs to be put in the trash can and burn up. It's divisive. It's a house divided. It will never stand. It is hell. I'm offering you an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to get involved with something if you are an American, you've been introduced to all your life, and that's God. Now, I'm not talking about the God that's on the side of evil now. I know Republicans say Democrats' God is evil. Democrats say Republican God is evil. And if that is being said, I want you to know it must be true on both sides. That God that the Republicans and the Democrats serve is evil. Why? Because look what the Democrats are doing. Look what the Republicans are doing. You have to have an evil God that will permit that. You have to have a God that you don't give a stink about to present that God to the world the way you're doing. When you can have heaven and you choose this, somebody need to tell you your God stinks. And you should try to find out what the problem is. Is it really your God or is it you? It just might be you. And if it's you, you can change that. But if it's your God, you give it up. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that we're talking about gas prices and all these things that we're having to go through right now. Well, this is still the world that we're living in. And it probably will get worse as an indication that it is ran on the power legs of evil. And that's what evil does. It gets worse and worse. And the balance must be made. It must be made by we the people. We can get up off of our knees asking God to do this or to do that. Because God will not be persuaded. I don't care what you've been hearing, what you read. God will not be persuaded by what you down on your knees begging for and crying for, lying for, trying to deceive God for. If God does anything for anyone, God chooses the moment and the one. You don't even have to ask for it. It just happens. And all you can say is, thank God. It was a miracle. But you laying down on your knees, flying all across the floor, begging to ask God to give you a job. And then you get a job and say, God gave you a job, and 15 other people over there ain't thinking about God. Got hired too. But you've been deceived to think God gave it to you. You know why you got that? It is a part of the outcome of this division teaching, making you think now that something's working for you that's not working for others. I want you to know, when you ask me to pray to God and ask God this for you, that for you, and I go to God and ask God this for you and that for you, and nothing happens, and I go back to ask God, God, what is happening in this relationship? And God says, go back and tell the people, I'm not doing for them what I have given them the ability to do for themselves. And if they got so much hate, so much ignorance and racism and bigotry that they would rather kill themselves than to show some respect and love for one another, the choice is theirs. But I send you, Eddie Marcus and others, to tell them the truth. Tell them I love them. I made them to enjoy the best. But whether they do or not, it's up to them. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that we're talking about now making changes. We're not up here talking about business as it was, or the Democrats can do better, or the Republicans now going to get some power to do this, and the United States Supreme Court is going to start manipulating itself, all these demon, evil spirits lying around in not all the people, but many of them, and throwing this here and our lives in a trash can dumped around like a dumpster. We must be out of our minds if we call ourselves knowing a God. I don't want to know nothing about that God that says that's okay. And I want you to forget that God that says it's okay, because I want to introduce you to a God that loves you and say, if you will, then God is sure to, if you say you can walk on water, when you step out there, you'll find out that water is solid enough for you to stand up on. Or move a mountain. You find out that mountain is light enough to move. I'm telling you about the truth, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not telling you about those stories you've been reading about and talking about. And I'll leave it to you to go and do some research if you want to on some of the posts that I've written. Most of the posts that I've written come straight from the spirit of the love for God have for you. Some of them I've been angry. They came straight from me, and I probably used some profanity to try to straighten you out. It didn't work, but I did it, and you'll find it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for giving me this your time. It has been, and is looking forward to being a much better time. Until then, Eddie Marcus saying goodbye.